Space loomed vast and cold beyond the viewports of the Dominion flagship. Commander Vorik Talon stood with his forearms clasped behind his back, all four of his eyes fixed on the swirling storms of Jupiter. The gas giant's massive form dominated the view, its legendary red spot churning with meteorological violence that had persisted for centuries. Much like the Draconian Empire itself, Vorik thought with pride, eternal, dominant, unstoppable. The bridge of the eternal dominance hummed with the efficiency that had made their empire the unchallenged force across 12 star systems. Crew members moved with precision at their stations, scales gleaming under the ambient lighting. Occasional eye flickers, the only sign of emotion as they processed battlefield data. "Status report," Vorik commanded, his voice carrying the distinctive rasp of Draconis Prime's thin atmosphere. Captain Mira, Z approached, her movements fluid despite the heavier gravity settings they maintained on all Imperial vessels. Day 37 of the Sol system incursion proceeds according to projections. Commander, we've established control of all Jovian moons of strategic value. The primitive colonies offered minimal resistance. Vorik nodded. The conquest of this backwater system had been proceeding with textbook efficiency. The humans had proven resourceful. Yes, but ultimately predictable in their desperation. Their scattered defense of the outer planets had been almost pitiful, brief flurries of resistance followed by retreat. "And the data gathered from the outposts?" he asked. Lieutenant Yakor, hunched over his intelligence console, responded without looking up. "Still processing, Commander. Their information storage systems are unusual, inefficient by our standards, but with surprising redundancies." Jakor was the quietest of his senior staff, but his analytical mind had proven invaluable in previous campaigns. "Their technological development is erratic," Mira added. "Advanced in unexpected areas, primitive in others. No coherent pattern to their research priorities." Vorik's upper eyes narrowed slightly. "A species without proper direction. This is why they were never meant to leave their homeworld." The Draconian Empire's expansion had been methodical for centuries. Identify, assess, conquer, assimilate. The discovery of Earth had been a mere accident, an automated probe detecting their nascent interplanetary communications. Initial observations had categorized humans as a Level 3 civilization, technologically capable of limited system travel, but lacking unified governance or coherent defensive strategy. Perfect for assimilation into the Empire. The Emperor himself had authorized the campaign after reviewing the assessment. A swift demonstration of force, minimal casualties if they surrendered promptly, and Earth would become another productive member of the Draconian hegemony. "The human vessels continue to retreat toward their homeworld," Mira continued. "Their pattern suggests they're consolidating remaining forces around Mars and Earth." "As expected," Vorik replied. "They recognize the futility of resistance in the outer system. A rational choice." "Commander," Jakor interrupted, his lower eyes blinking rapidly, a sign of intense focus among their kind. "I'm detecting anomalous energy readings near Europa." Vorik turned sharply. "Specify." "Unknown signature. Not matching any previous human weapon systems we've encountered. It's—" The bridge lighting suddenly flickered as the ship shuddered violently. "Multiple impacts," shouted the tactical officer. "Shields at 83% and falling." "Visual," Vorik commanded. The main display shifted to show the space around Jupiter's orbit. Where moments before there had been only the Draconian fleet and the gas giant's serene moons, now dozens of sleek, angular vessels had appeared, seemingly from nowhere. They moved with impossible speed, firing concentrated energy pulses at the Draconian formations. "Stealth technology?" Mira's voice betrayed rare surprise. "Our sensors detected nothing until they opened fire." "Deploy countermeasures, battle formations," Vorik ordered, his mind racing. The intelligence reports had mentioned nothing of this capability. "Communications from all battle groups reporting simultaneous attacks throughout the system," Jakor reported, his voice tense. Fleet Admiral Zex's dreadnought has taken critical damage. Destroyer groups 7 through 15 reporting heavy casualties. The bridge rocked again as another volley struck the flagship. Shields at 60%. Return fire! Target their lead vessels! The Eternal Dominance's weapon systems roared to life, sending brilliant streams of energy toward the human ships. But the smaller vessels moved with uncanny agility, evading the majority of the draconian fire while continuing their precision strikes. "They're targeting our sensor arrays and weapon systems specifically," Mira observed, her tactical mind quickly assessing the situation. "These aren't desperate attacks. This is a coordinated military operation." For the first time since the campaign began, Vorik felt the cold edge of uncertainty. The humans weren't fighting like a disorganized Level 3 civilization. Their tactics spoke of discipline, strategic planning, and technologies that hadn't been detected by any of their reconnaissance. "Status of the fleet," he demanded. Jakor's reply was delivered in a flat tone that belied the gravity of his words. "We've lost contact with approximately 40% of our forces. Continuing losses at current rate would mean 60% reduction in combat capability within the next 12 minutes. Impossible." The most advanced civilizations they'd encountered had never managed to inflict more than 20% casualties on a draconian assault force, even in prolonged engagements. These humans were decimating their fleet in minutes. "Pull back to secondary positions," Vorik ordered. "Regroup at the designated fallback coordinates. We need to reassess." As the Eternal Dominance disengaged from the immediate battle zone, moving into Jupiter's magnetic shadow for temporary cover, the bridge fell into a tense silence, broken only by the continuing reports of losses throughout the system. "How did they conceal this level of military capability?" Vorik finally asked, his voice low. Mira, who had been analyzing the battle data, looked up. "Commander, I believe they wanted us to underestimate them. The earlier engagements, they were sacrificing outdated technology and minimal forces to create a false impression of their capabilities. A deliberate deception." Vorik's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of deep disturbance in draconian body language. "All evidence supports Captain Z's assessment," Jakor added. "The probe data we based our invasion plans on? It's possible they detected it and fed it manufactured information." The implications were staggering. The Empire had never encountered a species that engaged in such elaborate strategic deception. Most races either displayed their full military might as deterrence or genuinely lacked significant defensive capabilities. "Commander," the communications officer interrupted, "we're receiving reports that human forces have appeared in significant numbers near Mars as well. They seem to have emerged from nowhere." "That's not possible," Vorik said sharply. "Show me." The tactical display shifted to show the orbital space around the red planet. What Vorik saw defied explanation. A massive swirling vortex of energy had formed in space, something that resembled theoretical models of artificial wormholes that draconian scientists had deemed impractical due to energy requirements. And from this spatial distortion poured ships, not dozens, not hundreds, thousands. 3,000 individual vessels and counting, Jakor reported, his voice barely audible. Configuration unknown, not matching any previously observed human vessel designs. "They've been hiding an entire fleet?" Mira whispered. "No," Jakor replied, his eyes fixed on his readings. "These ships are new. Based on material composition analysis, they appear to have been recently constructed." The bridge fell silent as the implications settled in. The humans hadn't just been hiding their capabilities. They'd been building, preparing, waiting for the right moment. And the Draconian Empire had obligingly provided that moment by initiating this invasion. "We're receiving a broadcast," the communications officer announced. "It's being transmitted on all frequencies, directed at all Draconian vessels." Vorik hesitated only briefly. "Display it." The main screen shifted to show a human female in what appeared to be a military uniform. Her dark skin contrasted with silver-streaked hair, pulled back severely from a face lined with age and experience. Despite her obviously advanced years, she stood with rigid posture that radiated authority. "This is Admiral Tessa Blackwell of the United Earth Defense Force," she began, her voice calm and measured. "To the commanding officers of the Draconian invasion fleet, you have entered sovereign human territory without provocation and engaged in hostile actions against our outposts and citizens. We have demonstrated a fraction of our defensive capabilities. You now face the full united response of humanity." She paused, her eyes seeming to look directly at Vorik. "We understand that your empire operates on principles of strength and dominance. We respect these values enough to speak to you in terms you will comprehend. Your assessment of Earth was fundamentally flawed. You believed our political divisions made us weak. In reality, they forged us through competition. You mistook our measured response for limitation. It was strategic patience." The display split to show the continuing emergence of vessels from the Mars portal, while Blackwell continued speaking. "You have exactly 1 standard hour to cease all hostile actions, power down your weapon systems, and prepare to receive diplomatic envoys. Any vessel that remains in a combat posture after this deadline will be considered an ongoing threat and eliminated. We await your response. Blackwell out." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. "Options," Vorik finally said, his voice tight. Mira was the first to speak. "Commander, based on observed capabilities, continuing the engagement would result in catastrophic losses. The humans have demonstrated technological superiority in key areas: stealth systems, portal creation, and coordinated fleet tactics." "We cannot retreat," one of the other officers countered. "The Empire has never abandoned a sanctioned campaign. The dishonor would be unacceptable." "The dishonor of complete destruction would be worse," Yakor observed quietly. "We cannot bring intelligence of these new threats back to the Empire if we are all dead." Vorik's mind raced through the possibilities. The carefully planned invasion had transformed into a potential disaster in minutes. Everything they had believed about human capabilities had been wrong. "Lieutenant Jakor," he said sharply, "full analysis of that portal technology. How are they generating it? What are its limitations?" "Working, Commander. Preliminary assessment suggests it's a form of controlled Einstein-Rosen bridge. But the energy requirements would be..." Yakor's voice trailed off as his eyes widened at the readings. "Immense. Beyond our current theoretical models." "And these new ships?" Mira had been studying the tactical data. Based on movement patterns and energy signatures, they appear to be drone vessels, highly sophisticated, but likely unmanned or minimally crewed. "Mass-produced," Vorik concluded. "That's how they've fielded thousands so quickly." The implications were staggering. A civilization capable of mass-producing advanced warships and creating stable spatial portals for rapid deployment was no Level 3 society. This was a technological capability that rivaled or exceeded the Draconian Empire's own achievements. "We need more information before deciding our course of action," Vorik said finally. "Open a channel to Admiral Blackwell. I will speak with her directly." The communications officer worked at his console. "Channel open, Commander." Vorik straightened his posture, conscious that his next words would be historic. The first direct communication between the Draconian Empire and humanity. "Admiral Blackwell, this is Commander Vorik Talon of the Draconian Imperial Fleet. I acknowledge receipt of your communication and request clarification on several points before responding to your demands." The screen remained blank for several seconds before Blackwell's image appeared again. "Proceed with your questions, Commander Talon. But be aware that the deadline stands regardless of our conversation." Vorik noted the firm tone, neither aggressive nor conciliatory. This was not a leader overawed by the presence of an advanced interstellar empire. It confirmed his growing suspicion that humanity was far more than it had initially appeared. Your portal technology and fleet capabilities were unanticipated in our assessment of Earth's development level. Has this been a deliberate deception, Admiral? Blackwell's expression remained neutral. Commander, when we detected your probe analyzing our system, we made a strategic decision. Throughout human history, appearing weaker than one actually is has provided tactical advantages against aggressors. We simply allowed you to draw your own conclusions from limited data. A strategy of deliberate misinformation, Vorik observed. A strategy of survival, Blackwell corrected. Had you approached openly with diplomatic intentions, you would have discovered our true nature. Instead, you chose invasion based on a hasty assessment of perceived weakness. The rebuke was subtle but clear. The Empire's standard protocols had never accounted for a species that would hide its true capabilities rather than display them as deterrents. The portal at Mars, Vorik continued. This is not a technology we have observed in any other civilization at your development stage. For the first time, a slight smile crossed Blackwell's face. The Fold Space Transit System was developed in response to your arrival in our system. Commander, necessity has always accelerated human innovation. We had the theoretical framework. Your invasion provided the motivation to make it operational. Vorik felt his lower eyes blinking rapidly in disbelief. You developed and deployed this technology in 37 days? 35, actually. The first 2 days were spent in debate about whether diplomatic outreach might be possible. Once we confirmed your intentions were hostile, unified action was approved by all Earth governments. The implications were staggering. A species capable of moving from theoretical physics to practical implementation of revolutionary technology in weeks rather than decades was unlike anything in the Empire's extensive records of conquered civilizations. And your new fleet? Modular design, 3D printed components, automated assembly. Once we had the production template optimized, we simply scaled up manufacturing. Your Empire may have centuries of steady development, Commander Talon, but humans excel at rapid adaptation under threat. Vorik turned to look at his officers, seeing his own shock reflected in their expressions. The draconian military doctrine was built on overwhelming force and technological superiority. In just minutes, both assumptions had been shattered regarding this supposedly primitive species. I will confer with my officers regarding your demands. Admiral Blackwell, expect our response within your stated time frame. We'll be waiting. Commander. Blackwell out. As the transmission ended, Vorik turned to face his senior staff. Analysis and recommendations. Speak freely. Mira was the first to respond. Commander, continued military engagement would be catastrophic. Their technological capabilities exceed our intelligence estimates by orders of magnitude. The portal technology alone represents a strategic advantage we cannot counter with our current forces. Retreating to Draconian space to report this development would be the prudent course, Jakor added. The Empire must be informed of this new power. Retreat without the Emperor's explicit order is treason, countered Security Chief Drex, his scales flushing with the deep crimson of anger. We are Draconian warriors. We do not surrender to lesser species. Is that what they are? Vorik asked quietly, his gaze returning to the tactical display, showing the continuing emergence of vessels from the Mars portal. Our assessment may have been fundamentally flawed. The bridge fell silent as the weight of his words settled in. The Draconian Empire had expanded for centuries on the bedrock belief in their inherent superiority. To question that, even implicitly, was near heresy. What do we actually know about them? Vorik finally asked. Not our initial assessment. What have we learned since engaging them? Jakor, always the methodical analyst, responded. They appear to be highly adaptable, capable of rapid technological development when pressured. Their political fragmentation, which we interpreted as weakness, seems to generate internal competition that drives innovation. And their military doctrine, Vorik pressed. Based on observed tactics, Mira replied. They prefer asymmetric engagement, striking at critical vulnerabilities, rather than matching force directly. They use deception strategically and appear to have extensive contingency planning. Not the actions of a primitive species, Vorik concluded. No, Mira agreed. More like a predator species that evolved through constant competition. The comparison struck Vorik with unexpected force. Draconians had evolved as apex predators on their homeworld, which had shaped their society's hierarchical structure and expansionist impulses. Had humans followed a similar evolutionary path? The thought was both disturbing and compelling. We have 43 minutes remaining before their deadline, Vorik noted. Continue analyzing their capabilities, but prepare two response scenarios: continued engagement and diplomatic accommodation. The second option hung in the air like a heretical proclamation. Never in recorded history had a draconian commander considered accommodation during a sanctioned imperial expansion. "Commander," Drex began, his voice tight with restraint. The Imperial Mandate is clear regarding... The Imperial Mandate assumes accurate intelligence and achievable objectives. Vorik interrupted. Neither condition currently applies. My responsibility is to the Empire's long-term interests, not a single campaign success. As his officers dispersed to their stations, Vorik returned his gaze to the tactical displays. The human vessels were now forming precise defensive formations around Mars and in Jupiter's orbit. Their movement spoke of discipline and strategic cohesion that belied their reputation as a politically fragmented species. "Lieutenant Jakor," he called, "access all available data on human history and warfare. I want to understand how they fight when truly threatened." Jakor worked silently for several minutes before looking up, his four eyes blinking in a pattern that indicated deep concern. "Commander, their historical records show a species with unsettling capabilities when facing existential threats. They've developed from primitive projectile weapons to nuclear technology to interplanetary travel in less than 300 years. An acceleration rate unmatched by any species in our records. And their warfare. Adaptive, innovative, often ruthless. They've developed and deployed planet-killing weapons, then voluntarily restricted their use, not from inability, but from self-imposed ethical constraints. Their conflicts show extreme oscillation between savagery and mercy." Vorik absorbed this information with growing unease. The Empire had encountered warlike species before, but they typically followed predictable patterns: aggression tempered by resource limitations or technological plateaus. A species that could advance explosively under pressure and yet impose voluntary restrictions on its own power was unpredictable. "Commander," the sensor officer interrupted, "we're detecting unusual energy patterns from the human fleet." "Explain." "They appear to be communicating, sir. Not standard transmissions, but some form of quantum-entangled signals that bypass our monitoring systems. Coordinating without detectable communications. Another capability that hadn't been in the intelligence reports." 30 minutes to their deadline, Mira noted quietly. Vorik made his decision. "Open a channel to Admiral Blackwell." When the human admiral's face appeared on screen again, Vorik noted subtle changes in her expression, a slight tension around the eyes that suggested she was receiving information, even as they spoke. "Commander Talon, have you reached a decision?" "I have questions regarding your terms, Admiral. What exactly do you mean by diplomatic envoys?" Blackwell's expression remained measured. "A formal delegation to discuss terms for your complete withdrawal from the Sol system and recognition of human sovereign territory. The Draconian Empire does not typically negotiate with species you've decided are inferior," Blackwell finished for him. "Yes, we anticipated that position, which is why we demonstrated our capabilities first. This isn't a negotiation between unequals, Commander. It's a choice between respectful disengagement or continued conflict with a species you clearly underestimated." The directness was jarring by draconian diplomatic standards. But Vorik found himself appreciating the clarity. There was no posturing, no attempt to seem more reasonable than her position warranted. Just the cold calculation of a military leader stating facts. And if we were to agree to these diplomatic discussions, you and 2 officers of your choosing would be transported to Earth Orbital Command. Standard diplomatic protocols would apply. You would retain communication with your fleet, but would come unarmed. That would place us at a significant disadvantage. You placed yourselves at a disadvantage when you invaded a system without understanding its defenders, Blackwell replied evenly. We're offering a path that doesn't end with the destruction of your fleet. 28 minutes remaining. Commander. Before Vorik could respond, the tactical display flashed red. Multiple energy signatures, shouted the sensor officer. The human fleet is... The ship rocked violently as alarms blared across the bridge. What's happening? Vorik demanded. They're jamming our systems, Yakor reported urgently. Some form of targeted electromagnetic pulse combined with quantum interference. Shields are fluctuating. Evasive maneuvers, Vorik ordered. All power to defensive systems. Commander, Mira called out. Her voice strained as she studied the tactical display. The attack pattern is unusual. They're not targeting critical systems directly. Explain. They're using precision strikes to degrade our shields systematically, sector by sector. And, she paused, eyes widening. At least 60% of the vessels on our sensors are reading as empty. They're decoys. Realization dawned on Vorik with cold clarity. They're forcing us to spread our defensive capabilities, while they identify the weaknesses in our shield harmonics. A classic concentration of force strategy, Mira confirmed. And it's working. Shields down to 40% and failing in multiple sectors. Admiral Blackwell, Vorik called, turning back to the communication screen which somehow remained active despite the jamming affecting their other systems. This is hardly conducive to diplomatic discussions. This is a demonstration, Commander, Blackwell replied calmly. Your shields will fail completely in approximately 12 minutes. Your weapon systems are currently operating at 30% efficiency due to our jamming measures. We could destroy your flagship and most of your remaining fleet before your deadline expires. As if to emphasize her point, a series of precise energy pulses struck the eternal dominance, causing the bridge lighting to flicker ominously. Shields at 28%, reported the defense officer. Critical failure imminent in multiple sectors. Vorik felt the weight of command pressing down on him like never before. The carefully calculated draconian expansion had never accounted for a scenario like this, facing a technologically superior opponent who had deliberately concealed their capabilities. Everything about this encounter defied the imperial doctrine that had guided countless successful conquests. We accept your terms, Vorik said finally, the words feeling foreign in his mouth. Cease your attack, and I will come with 2 officers to discuss withdrawal. For a moment, Blackwell's expression showed genuine surprise. Perhaps she had expected more resistance. Then she nodded briskly. Stand down weapons and shields as a sign of good faith. We'll provide transport coordinates shortly. As the transmission ended, the bridge erupted in protest. Commander, this is unprecedented, Drex exclaimed. No Imperial force has ever faced this situation. Vorik cut him off. Their technology exceeds ours in key areas. They could destroy this fleet without significant losses. The Empire will view this as weakness, another officer warned. The Empire will receive full data on human capabilities, Vorik replied firmly. They will understand that strategic withdrawal is preferable to pointless destruction. As the protests subsided into uneasy acceptance, Vorik made his selections. Captain Za, Lieutenant Jakor, you will accompany me to these negotiations. The rest of you will maintain fleet integrity and prepare for potential withdrawal from the system. Mira nodded sharply, while Jakor merely blinked his acknowledgement, already absorbed in analyzing the data from the recent attack. Commander, The communications officer interrupted. We're receiving transport coordinates and instructions for approach. They specify no weapons, limited technology, and compliance with escort protocols. Terms that would be insulting to draconian dignity under normal circumstances. But Vorik merely nodded. Understood. Prepare a shuttle. As they made their way to the shuttle bay, Mira finally spoke. Commander, what is our objective in these negotiations? Information, Vorik replied simply. We need to understand what we're truly facing. This species has capabilities that defy our classification systems. Before the Empire commits more resources to this conflict, we need accurate intelligence. And if they demand terms that the Empire would find unacceptable. Vorik paused before boarding the shuttle. Then we will face the reality that sometimes expansion meets its limit. The Empire has endured for millennia by recognizing when to conquer and when to consolidate. The journey to Earth was conducted in tense silence. Their shuttle, stripped of weapons and escorted by 4 human vessels that maintained a formation, speaking of both caution and precision, traveled through normal space rather than the full technology the humans had demonstrated. Whether this was a security precaution or simply protocol, Vorik couldn't determine. As they approached the blue-green planet, Vorik found himself studying it with new perspective. Initial reports had described Earth as unremarkable, a water-rich world with diverse but manageable environmental conditions. Now, looking at the swirling cloud patterns and vast oceans, he wondered what other aspects of humanity they had fundamentally misunderstood. Their destination wasn't the planet itself, but a massive orbital station positioned at one of the Lagrange points between Earth and its moon. The structure dwarfed anything humans had been believed capable of building. A sprawling complex of interconnected modules and docking arrays that spoke of advanced engineering and significant industrial capacity. They've been concealing their development level systematically, Jacor observed quietly as they approached. This station alone would have reclassified them to at least level 4 in our assessment protocols. The docking procedure was executed with precision. Their shuttle guided into a berth that sealed around them with technology that Vorik noted was compatible with their own atmospheric requirements. Another indication of careful preparation. When the airlock opened, they were met by a delegation of 5 humans in what appeared to be formal military attire. Admiral Blackwell stood at their center, flanked by a tall male with close-cropped gray hair and the rigid posture of a career soldier. A smaller female with features suggesting Eastern Earth ancestry, and 2 others whose roles weren't immediately apparent. Commander Talon, Blackwell greeted them formally. Welcome to Orbital Command Alpha. I am Admiral Tessa Blackwell, Supreme Commander of Earth's United Defense Forces. Allow me to introduce General Marcus Drake, Chief of Combined Military Operations, Dr. Akira Tanaka, Director of Advanced Scientific Research, Director Elena Santiago of Diplomatic Affairs, and General Vikram Patel, Strategic Command. Vorik responded with equal formality. Captain Mira Zeh, our Tactical Specialist, and Lieutenant Jacor, Intelligence Analyst. The introductions complete. Blackwell gestured toward a corridor. This way to the conference chamber. We've adjusted environmental settings to approximate draconian standard conditions based on data gathered from your outposts. The gesture wasn't lost on Vorik, both a courtesy and a subtle reminder of how much information they had already gathered about draconian physiology and preferences. The conference chamber was a large, circular room, dominated by a round table that eliminated any hierarchical seating arrangements. Another calculated choice. Vorik suspected. The walls displayed rotating holographic images of Earth's various regions and environments, creating an immersive reminder of whose territory they were currently occupying. Once seated, Blackwell wasted no time on diplomatic niceties. Let's be direct, Commander. Your empire initiated hostile action against a sovereign species without provocation or attempt at communication. Under any recognized interstellar protocol, this would be classified as an act of war. The Draconian Empire does not recognize the sovereignty of pre-intergalactic civilizations. Vorik responded automatically, then regretted the reflexive defense of imperial doctrine. It sounded hollow, even to his own ears after the demonstration of human capabilities. General Drake leaned forward, his expression cold. Your empire's recognition or lack thereof is irrelevant. Your classification systems failed you. You operated on false assumptions and insufficient intelligence. These are basic military errors that have cost you 60% of your invasion force. The bluntness was jarring but accurate. Vorik found himself respecting the human's direct approach, even as it challenged everything the Empire stood for. "What are your terms?" Vorik asked, deciding that continuation of doctrinal arguments would waste time they didn't have. Dr. Tanaka, the smallest of the humans present, spoke for the first time. Her voice was soft but precise. Complete withdrawal of all draconian forces from the Sol system within 72 hours. Recognition of Sol and all its planets as sovereign human territory. A non-aggression pact with specific parameters for any future contact. "And in exchange," Vorik prompted. "We don't destroy your remaining fleet," General Patel said flatly. "And we provide safe passage for your withdrawal." Director Santiago, who had been observing silently, finally spoke. "We're also prepared to release all Draconian personnel captured during the conflict. Approximately 800 of your soldiers and crew members are currently in our custody following the initial engagements." This was unexpected. Vorik had assumed those vessels had been destroyed with all hands. "You took prisoners?" Mira asked, surprise evident in her voice. "We're not barbarians," Blackwell replied evenly. "When possible, we captured rather than killed. Those who surrendered were treated according to our protocols for prisoners of war, with dignity and appropriate medical care." Another assumption shattered. The Draconian intelligence assessment had characterized humans as primitive and potentially savage, based on their fractious internal conflicts. Yet they had apparently extended consideration to captured enemies that exceeded standard Draconian military practices. "I would like to understand something," Vorik said carefully. "Your species was assessed as technologically inferior and politically divided. Yet you've demonstrated capabilities that suggest otherwise. Was our entire assessment flawed, or have you advanced dramatically since our initial observations?" The human leaders exchanged glances before Dr. Tanaka responded. "Both, in a sense. Your assessment suffered from 3 critical errors," she explained, activating a holographic display in the center of the table. "First, you mistook political diversity for weakness. Earth has never had a unified government. True, but this creates competitive innovation and multiple approaches to problem solving." The display showed the complex network of Earth's nations and alliances, highlighting how resources and research flowed between them. "Second, you observed our visible military assets, but failed to account for our production capacity when fully mobilized. Earth's industrial base can be rapidly converted from civilian to military applications when threatened." The hologram shifted to show manufacturing facilities transforming from commercial to military production with remarkable speed. "And third, perhaps most importantly," Tanaka continued, "you fundamentally misunderstood human psychology. Throughout our history, nothing has united disparate human factions faster than an external threat. The moment your probe was detected, traditional rivalries were set aside in favor of unified defense planning." General Drake nodded grimly. "Your arrival triggered what we call a wartime economy across all major nations. Research that had been theoretical was fast-tracked for practical application. Production was maximized. The portal technology Dr. Tanaka mentioned had been in development for decades as a potential solution for interstellar travel. Your invasion provided both the urgency and the unified funding to complete it." Vorik absorbed this information with growing understanding. The Empire had encountered thousands of species over its long history, but none that operated quite like humans appeared to, fractious and competitive internally, yet capable of seamless unification against external threats. "And the stealth technology that allowed your initial strike?" Jakor asked. "Adaptation of existing technologies combined with insights from studying your sensor systems," Tanaka replied. "We've been analyzing your technology since your first scouts entered the system. Every probe, every communication, provided data on your capabilities and limitations. The implications were staggering. While the Empire had been conducting its standard assessment and preparation for assimilation, the humans had been actively studying and countering draconian technology." "I see three possibilities for how we proceed," Blackwell said, returning to the immediate situation. "First, you accept our terms, withdraw your forces, and the Draconian Empire recognizes the sovereignty of Earth and the Sol system. Second, you reject our terms, and we resume hostilities, which will end with the complete destruction of your remaining forces. Third, you attempt to stall while calling for reinforcements, in which case we will immediately execute option 2. The directness was refreshing after centuries of diplomatic obfuscation that Vorik had witnessed in imperial politics. "There is a fourth option," Vorik replied carefully. "One that serves both our interests. I accept your core terms, withdrawal, and recognition of your sovereignty. But instead of a simple non-aggression pact, I propose a formal diplomatic relationship between our civilizations." This clearly wasn't what the humans had expected. Blackwell's expression remained neutral, but several of the others showed visible surprise. "Elaborate," Director Santiago prompted. "The Draconian Empire has encountered thousands of species across 12 star systems," Vorik explained. "Many have been assimilated, true, but others have established mutually beneficial relationships as autonomous allies. Your demonstration of technological capability and resource mobilization suggests you could be valuable as partners, rather than subjects." "You're proposing an alliance?" General Patel asked incredulously. "After invading our system?" "I'm proposing recognition of reality," Vorik replied evenly. "The Empire expands because it has never encountered a force capable of stopping it. You have demonstrated such capability. This changes the fundamental calculation." The humans exchanged glances again, communicating in the subtle facial expressions that Vorik was still learning to interpret. "We would need guarantees beyond your word," Blackwell said finally. "And verification measures to ensure compliance." "Reasonable," Vorik agreed. "In return, we would expect technological exchange in areas of mutual benefit and defined boundaries for future contact." Santiago leaned forward. "This is a significant deviation from expected draconian diplomatic patterns, based on historical data we've recovered from your outposts. What assurance do we have that your empire will honor such an arrangement?" Vorik considered his response carefully. "The empire has endured for millennia by adapting to new realities. Your species represents a new reality, one that cannot be conquered through conventional means without unacceptable losses. The Imperial Council will recognize this once they receive full data on your capabilities." "And if they don't?" Drake asked bluntly. "Then, I will have exceeded my authority," Vorik admitted. "But the alternative is the destruction of this fleet and the loss of all gathered intelligence on human capabilities. The Empire would simply send another, larger force based on the same flawed assumptions. The cycle would repeat with greater losses on both sides. It was a gamble, one that could potentially end his career, or worse, when he returned to Draconis Prime. But Vorik had seen enough to know that the standard Imperial approach would fail spectacularly against this unusual species. "We need time to consider your proposal," Blackwell said after a moment, "and to consult with Earth's governing bodies." "Understandable," Vorik replied. "But be aware that my fleet commanders will expect communication within 6 hours. After that, They are understanding orders to assume capture and initiate recovery protocols. Which would mean what, exactly? Patel asked sharply. A concentrated attack on this station to attempt recovery, followed by immediate withdrawal to Draconian space. Vorik explained. It would be unfortunate for all involved. Then, we'll provide our response within 5 hours, Blackwell said firmly. In the meantime, you will be escorted to appropriate quarters. You may maintain communication with your fleet to prevent any misunderstandings. As they were led from the conference chamber, Mira moved closer to Vorik. Commander, the diplomatic approach you've proposed. It's unprecedented. So is our current situation, Vorik replied quietly. We face a species that has countered our technology, reversed our tactical advantages, and demonstrated capacity for innovation that exceeds our own. The Empire's survival has always depended on recognizing and adapting to new threats. The Imperial Council may not see it that way, she cautioned. Then, I will bear the consequences, Vorik said simply. But I will not sacrifice this fleet in a futile engagement when an alternative exists. Their quarters proved to be comfortable and appropriately adjusted for Draconian physiology, another indication of how thoroughly the humans had studied them. Through a viewport, Vorik could see Earth rotating slowly below, its surface a swirl of blue oceans, white clouds, and the green and brown of land masses. It looked deceptively peaceful from this distance. Lieutenant, he said, turning to Jakor, who was examining the room's features with his usual methodical attention. Your assessment of human capabilities based on what we've seen. Jakor's 4 eyes blinked in sequence as he organized his thoughts. Technologically, they're at least level 5 in key areas: energy manipulation, materials science, information systems. Their portal technology exceeds our current capabilities. Their military doctrine is adaptive and pragmatic, rather than rigidly hierarchical like ours. And their political structure, while appearing chaotic, seems to generate diversity of approach that becomes advantageous under pressure. A dangerous combination, Mira observed. But potentially valuable as allies, rather than subjects, Vorik countered. The Empire has grown complacent in its superiority. Perhaps this encounter will provide perspective. Before further discussion could develop, a communication alert sounded. When Vorik activated it, Admiral Blackwell's image appeared. Commander Talon, our leadership councils have reached a decision more quickly than anticipated. Your presence is requested in the conference chamber. The brevity suggested urgency, but Vorik could detect no obvious signs of hostility in her tone or expression. We'll come immediately. When they returned to the conference chamber, they found the same human leaders waiting, but with the addition of several view screens showing other figures, presumably the political leadership Blackwell had mentioned. Commander Talon, Blackwell began formally. After consultation with Earth's Unified Defense Council and key governmental representatives, we have a response to your proposal. Vorik braced himself for rejection, already calculating fallback options. We accept the principle of establishing formal diplomatic relations rather than a simple non-aggression pact, she continued, surprising him. However, we have specific conditions that are non-negotiable. Director Santiago took over, activating a holographic display of a document. First, immediate and complete withdrawal of all Draconian military forces from the Sol system, to be completed within the original 72-hour time frame. Second, formal recognition of Earth and all Sol system territories as sovereign and independent, not subject to any claim by the Draconian Empire. Third, establishment of a demilitarized zone extending 5 light-years from Sol in all directions, with specified protocols for any Draconian vessels entering this zone. The terms were strict, but not unreasonable given the circumstances. Vorik assessed. They essentially established a buffer zone while allowing for controlled contact. Fourth, Santiago continued. Exchange of diplomatic representatives within 1 standard Earth year, following appropriate preparation and cultural briefing. Fifth, limited technological exchange in non-military areas, such as medicine, environmental management, and sustainable resource utilization. This last point was unexpected, an opening for cooperation rather than simple coexistence. It suggested the humans were looking beyond the immediate conflict toward potential future benefits. And, finally, Blackwell concluded, your immediate withdrawal will be monitored but unimpeded. All Draconian prisoners will be returned at designated coordinates once your fleet has passed Saturn's orbit. These terms are acceptable in principle, Vorik replied carefully, though I must note that I can only provisionally commit the Empire pending review by the Imperial Council. We understand the limits of your authority, Santiago acknowledged. However, we require your personal commitment to advocate for these terms upon your return. It was a clever stipulation. They recognized he couldn't bind the Empire, but wanted his individual commitment as a military leader. The distinction would be meaningful in Draconian culture, where personal honor often transcended political expediency. You have it, Vorik stated firmly. I will present these terms to the Imperial Council, with my strongest recommendation for acceptance. Then we have an agreement in principle, Blackwell said, rising from her seat. A formal document will be prepared for your review before departure. In the meantime, consider yourselves guests rather than adversaries. As the meeting concluded, Dr. Tanaka approached Vorik directly. Commander, if I might have a moment of your time, there's something I believe would be valuable for you to see before you depart. Curious. Vorik agreed, following the human scientist through the station's corridors with Mira and Jakor close behind. They eventually reached what appeared to be an observation deck overlooking a vast chamber below. This is one of our manufacturing centers, Tanaka explained, gesturing to the activity visible through the transparent barrier. Specifically, this facility produces components for our defense systems. What Vorik saw defied easy comprehension. Massive machines worked with precision beyond anything he had observed outside the most advanced Draconian facilities. But the true surprise was the speed and adaptability on display. Components being designed, modified, and produced in a continuous flow that spoke of manufacturing capability far beyond what Earth had been believed to possess. How is this possible? Mira asked, her tactical mind immediately grasping the strategic implications. Our intelligence suggested your industrial base was fragmented and relatively primitive. It was, by your standards, until very recently, Tanaka confirmed. What you're seeing is the result of what we call crisis innovation, the rapid advancement that occurs when human ingenuity is focused by existential threat. She activated a display panel showing a timeline. This facility didn't exist 6 weeks ago, when your probe was detected and its purpose identified. Emergency protocols were activated globally. Resources were diverted. Research priorities shifted, and production capabilities unified under central coordination. You built this in 6 weeks? Jakor asked, disbelief evident in his voice. We adapted existing facilities and technologies, Tanaka corrected. The principles were already understood. The implementation was accelerated by necessity. Why show us this? Vorik asked, suspecting there was purpose beyond simple demonstration. Tanaka's expression became serious. Because you need to understand something fundamental about humanity before you report back to your empire. We don't want war. We would prefer peaceful coexistence and mutual advancement. But if threatened, there is virtually no limit to how quickly we can mobilize and adapt. A warning, Vorik observed. A reality, Tanaka countered. One that your empire should carefully consider before any future decisions regarding Earth. What you've witnessed is only a fraction of our capability when united by common purpose. The message was clear and compelling. Earth wasn't merely defending itself with existing technology. It was actively evolving its capabilities in response to the threat. This pattern of accelerated development under pressure was unlike anything in draconian historical records. "I understand," Vorik said finally. "And I will ensure the Imperial Council understands as well." As they returned to their temporary quarters to await the formal documentation, Vorik found himself reflecting on the fundamental misjudgment that had led to this situation. The Empire had classified Earth based on observable technology and political structures, missing entirely the adaptive capacity that truly defined human civilization. "We need to completely reassess our categorization protocols," he said to his officers. "The standard metrics failed us here." "Not just the metrics," Mira replied thoughtfully. "Our entire approach to expansion may need reconsideration. If there are other species with similar adaptive capabilities." The implication hung in the air. The Draconian Empire had expanded for centuries on the assumption of inherent superiority. That assumption now lay shattered by the events of the past hours. "Perhaps that's the true value of this encounter," Vorik mused. "Not just establishing boundaries with one capable species, but recognizing that our understanding of galactic civilizations may be fundamentally incomplete." When the formal agreement was finally presented, Vorik reviewed it carefully before adding his authentication mark. The terms were as discussed, with additional protocols for communication and verification that seemed reasonable under the circumstances. Their departure from the station was conducted with the same efficiency that had characterized all human operations they'd observed. As their shuttle returned to the Eternal Dominance, Vorik watched Earth receding in the viewport, a deceptively peaceful blue sphere that had just fundamentally altered the course of draconian imperial expansion. Upon returning to his flagship, Vorik immediately called his senior officers to the command center. The news of the diplomatic agreement was met with mixed reactions: shock, disbelief, and in some cases, barely concealed outrage. "This is unprecedented," Security Chief Drex protested. "No Imperial campaign has ever ended in withdrawal without the Emperor's direct order." "No Imperial campaign has ever encountered a species like humans," Vorik countered firmly. "I've made my decision based on direct observation of their capabilities and assessment of our strategic position." "The Empire will view this as failure," another officer warned. "The Empire will view this as intelligence," Vorik corrected. "We've discovered a species with technology that equals or exceeds our own in key areas, with unprecedented adaptive capacity and resource mobilization. This information is far more valuable than a Pyrrhic victory that would cost us the remainder of this fleet." Gradually, the protests subsided as Vorik outlined what they had observed: the portal technology, the manufacturing capabilities, the unified response that had emerged from Earth's supposedly fragmented political structure. "Prepare for systematic withdrawal," he ordered finally. "All vessels are to maintain non-aggressive posture and follow the designated departure corridors. Any deviation could be interpreted as hostile action and result in immediate response." As the Draconian fleet began its organized retreat from the Sol system, Vorik stood on the bridge of the Eternal Dominance, watching the tactical displays track their progress. True to their word, the humans were monitoring, but not interfering with the withdrawal. "Commander," Jacquor reported, "we're receiving the first transport of returned prisoners at the designated coordinates near Saturn." Another confirmation that the humans intended to honor their agreements. It was a courtesy that Vorik suspected many Draconian commanders would not have extended under similar circumstances. "What will you tell the Emperor?" Mira asked quietly, joining him at the viewport. Vorik considered the question carefully. His report would shape the Empire's understanding of and approach to humanity for generations to come. "The truth," he said finally, "that we encountered a species unlike any in our records, one that appears divided, but unifies with extraordinary speed when threatened, one that conceals its true capabilities until provoked, one that advances technologically not through steady progression, but through explosive innovation under pressure." "And your recommendation?" That the Empire recognize Earth as a sovereign power and potential ally, rather than a conquest target. That we study their adaptive capabilities and perhaps learn from them, rather than simply seeking to absorb them. It was heresy by traditional imperial standards. But Vorik had seen enough to know that traditional approaches would fail catastrophically against humanity. Better to adapt the Empire's strategy than to persist in error. As the fleet passed beyond Neptune's orbit, following the withdrawal corridor specified in the agreement, Vorik received a final communication from Earth. Admiral Blackwell's face appeared on the main screen, her expression formal, but not hostile. Commander Talon, our sensors confirm your fleet is proceeding according to the agreed timeline and trajectory. The last of your personnel have been transferred to your vessels near Saturn. Is there anything else required before you leave our system? No, Admiral. The withdrawal proceeds as planned. We will cross your system boundary within 18 hours. Blackwell nodded. Then, this will be our final communication until diplomatic channels are established. I trust you will convey accurately to your leadership what you have observed here. You have my word, Vorik replied. Though I cannot predict how the Imperial Council will respond. We understand. But regardless of their decision, know this. Earth will be watching. We prefer peace and cooperation, but we will be prepared if your empire chooses another path. The subtle warning was clear, but not threatening. Simply a statement of fact based on demonstrated capability. One question. If I may. Vorik said. Your species achieved in weeks what takes others decades. This adaptive capacity. Is it unique to humans, or something you believe exists in other species? Blackwell seemed to consider the question carefully before responding. We believe it's a natural outcome of evolution, under constant competition and changing conditions. Earth's history forced us to adapt or perish countless times. Perhaps there are others like us out there, species that appear unassuming until necessity reveals their true potential. It was both answer and warning. The galaxy might contain other civilizations that, like humanity, concealed depths of capability beneath seemingly ordinary exteriors. A perspective worth considering, Vorik acknowledged. Farewell, Admiral Blackwell. Farewell, Commander Talon, until we meet again under more peaceful circumstances. As the transmission ended, and the Eternal Dominance continued its journey out of the Sol system, Vorik turned to face the expanse of space ahead. The Draconian Empire had existed for millennia, expanding steadily on the assumption of inherent superiority. That assumption had been shattered in less than 40 days by a species that had seemed, at first glance, barely worth notice. Perhaps that was the true lesson of this encounter, that greatness wasn't measured by steady dominance, but by the capacity to face the unexpected and adapt. The Empire had stagnated in its certainty. Humans had flourished in their diversity and competitive innovation. As the last Draconian vessel crossed the boundary of the Sol system, Vorik issued his final order of the campaign. Set course for Draconis Prime, and prepare a complete data package on everything we've observed about humanity. The Empire has much to consider. Behind them, the blue star that humans called Sun diminished to a point of light among countless others. But Vorik knew that the impact of what had transpired in its vicinity would reshape Draconian imperial policy for generations to come. They had wanted an easy conquest and found instead a species that sent the kind of fight you regret asking for, not through overwhelming force, but through adaptation, innovation, and the unifying power of a common threat. It was a lesson the Empire would not soon forget, and one that Vorik suspected would ultimately make both civilizations stronger. As the Eternal Dominance engaged its drive for the long journey home, Vorik allowed himself a moment of reflection. The Empire had lost a battle, but gained something potentially more valuable, a new understanding of what it truly meant to be an advanced civilization, and perhaps, in time, a worthy ally rather than a conquered subject. The stars stretched into lines as the ship accelerated, carrying with it knowledge that would forever change the draconian view of the galaxy and their place within it.